Hey, welcome back everybody. This is Ian, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can add fully featured media upload functionality to your website or application. We're going to do that with Cloudinary's upload widget and with what they call a signed upload. They have two different types of uploads you can do, signed and unsigned. Unsigned is a lot quicker, but it's a little less secure. And then signed involves a backend API which generates a signature, making it much more secure. So we're going to go with the latter. I'll show you how to do it with a signed upload. I'm going to show you where you can find the code to follow along with this video. Then we'll jump right into it. So before we do that, let's go ahead and demo the application. Here you can see we're running on localhost 3000. We click upload files. This is the upload widget. Now right away you can see on the top that there's all these different sources. We're going to go with My Files, allowing us to upload images or videos from our computer, but you can also take images or videos from the web using web address. You can take a picture right now using your device's camera. You can connect to something like Google Drive or Dropbox, and then there's a bunch of other options for things like Unsplash, iStock, any one of those stock photography websites. The first one here selected already by default is My Files. We're going to click on this Browse button here. It goes to my downloads, so I'm going to find an image here. Click on open, and it gives me a preview of the image. It gives me some information about the asset as it's uploading it, and then it shows me down here in the bottom right corner that it's done. So if I click on done, I can see whenever the upload widget got the response back, my code was able to take that response and do something with it. And here it took the URL to the newly uploaded asset, in this case this picture of a cat walking at a harbor, and it put it on the page with an image tag. Likewise, instead of logging the response, all the data from the response to the console, like the developer console, we actually set it up in our code so that it prints it here onto the page. So this object right here is essentially what we're getting back from Cloudinary after everything's said and done. And then you can see here we have this secure URL. That's what we were able to use to add the image to the page. So a lot of functionality baked in. You don't have to code any of it. All you have to do is implement the upload widget into your application with a few lines of code. So let's go ahead and dive into that. Now, the place where you can find all of this code for this example that we're looking at here is going to be on github.com/nax3t/CLD, a bunch of stuff. I'll just put it in the description so you don't have to type it out. So go to the description of this video. You can click on that link. It'll take you to this repo. And then if you're familiar with Git, you can click on code and you can clone it this way, or if you're not familiar with it, then essentially just go to places like app.js where you can copy and paste all this code if you want to put it into your application, and then you can go into like the public directory. You can find the client-side JavaScript file inside the JS folder, upload client-widget.js. You can copy this code, you can go to public and you can get index.html. This is going to be our main HTML file that we were just looking at a moment ago. Right here. So you can copy that, paste it into your project. That's of course if you just aren't familiar with Git. Otherwise, just clone it down and you'll have everything you need. So here you can see that you have a .example env. Basically, the things that you're going to need from Cloudinary are, you're going to need a Cloudinary account. So if you don't have one, you can sign up for free, cloudinary.com. Once you're logged in, you'll be in your dashboard. There's a bunch of stuff going on in there, but on the left-hand side, you can find the area that takes you to your API key and your cloud name, and you can copy the cloud name, put it up here. You can copy the API key, and then most importantly, the API secret. It'll be hidden. You can toggle the visibility of it. You can copy that. That's the thing that you want to keep totally secret. The API key and the cloud name, not a big deal if people find out what they are. But that API secret is super sensitive data, and if someone has it, then they can essentially hack into your account and they can upload whatever they want using your credentials. So you don't want to expose that. The port for local development is just defaulted to 3000, and then the host is localhost. So those values will change in production. All right, cool. Everything you need is in the package.json in terms of dependencies. So you can see here we've got Cloudinary.env, Express, and HTTP errors. So all you'll have to do once you clone this down is do an npm install, and it'll give you all of those dependencies. If you're doing this whole thing from scratch, just make sure that you do an npm install Cloudinary.env, Express, HTTP errors. I'm going to show you everything step by step, but if you want to go back and reference this repository. The README has instructions for setup, how to run it, the project structure, what the files are, how they work, how they're all working together, what the key components are, and lastly, the environment variables that you'll need to get this project running. All right, with all that said, let's head over to VS Code. I'm going to walk you through the project code line by line so you can understand exactly how this works. All right, here we are in VS Code. Let's go ahead and start with app.js. So this is where the meat and potatoes of our application is going to be. First and foremost, we're going to check and see if we're in production. If we're not in production, then we need a way to get access to our local environment variables. We're doing that with .env, one of the dependencies for this project. And so here on this first line, we're saying, hey, if the process.env.node_env environment variable does not equal to the string value of production, then go ahead and require .env and run the config method on it. What that will do is give us access to all of the environment variables inside of our .env file. Now I gave you an example env file. Go ahead and rename that to .env. Make sure you do the npm install so you get .env included in your project dependencies, and then fill out that .env file with all the values for things like your API key, your cloud name, your API secret. All right, the rest of this in this little block of code here is just basic Express boilerplate. In fact, the next couple lines are essentially boilerplate. We're just telling it all of the static assets are going to be served from a folder called public. So that's actually where we're going to have our index.html, the main file that's going to connect to the client-side code, which is going to configure the upload widget and allow us to actually display that on the page. And then that actually sends the request back over here to the backend, which is the file we're looking at here. That's what everything down to line 8 does. Now line 10, we're actually bringing in Cloudinary from the Cloudinary SDK. So we're requiring it, and then we're accessing version 2, at which point we're going to run a config method and pass in a object literal with a bunch of configuration properties. So that's all happening here. And the reason that we're able to access things like process.env Cloudinary cloud name in development is because of this first line up here, where we actually brought in .env and we ran the configuration on it. So we do want to include that this is a secure, true configuration for Cloudinary. And moving on, this app.get, this is essentially a route. And this is how our front end is going to be able to send a fetch request or a AJAX request to our backend, and it's going to get the signature. So the API endpoint is /API/sign_upload_widget. And then it's going to invoke this method here, or this callback function rather. So the first thing we want to do here is create a timestamp. Really simple. We can just use the built-in date API with Node.js. Calling date.now will give us a timestamp for right now. Then we're going to get our signature from a utils library that's embedded inside of the Cloudinary SDK. So we just do cloudinary.utils.api_sign_request. This is a method, so we're going to pass in 2 arguments. The first argument is going to be an object literal here. It's going to include the timestamp that we created just a moment ago. It's going to include a folder. This part's optional, but if you want to have a destination where all of your images or videos are uploaded to in your Cloudinary dashboard, then you can indicate that here. And then this source UW string, this is because there is a hidden piece of information that gets sent from the upload widget on the front end, and the backend has to have a matching parameter for that. So this is just something that you have to include to make sure that this whole thing works, but it's essentially saying that the request is coming from a source that is the UW or the upload widget. Okay, and so here's the most important part of this puzzle here. We have to include as a second argument our API secret, which we are actually pulling from the configuration of Cloudinary. So we set it up here, and now we're actually pulling it out by doing a cloudinary.config.api_secret. So that's going to pass that along to this API sign request method from the Cloudinary utils, and the result of all of this is going to be a signature. So the signature is what we're going to send back as JSON to the front end, and then the upload widget can use that to send its request up to Cloudinary with whatever assets we're trying to upload. Now it's super important that you know in production you are going to want to put this API endpoint behind some sort of authentication. So make sure that your users are logged in before they can actually fetch something from this API endpoint. On the front end, they can send it, but on the back end, it should look for some type of JWT token or session to verify that the user is who they say they are. And then once it's got that verification out of the way, it can create the signature and send it back. This example here is simplified just for learning purposes, but we don't have any type of authentication set up ahead of this API endpoint, so anybody running the application can send a request and get back a signature. All right, so let's move on to the JSON response that we're sending back down here. Essentially, we're passing in this object literal. It's going to include the signature that we just generated, along with the timestamp that the signature has inside of it, as well as the cloud name. So again, that's going to come from our Cloudinary config, and the API key, again, coming from the Cloudinary config. So with those 4 elements inside of this object, we're going to send that back to the front end as JSON. So after that, we just have some more boilerplate stuff. We've got a 404 handler here, some more error handling stuff. Essentially, if someone tries to go to a route that doesn't exist, in this case, we only have the 1 route. Well, technically we have 2 because our main root route is going to be serving our index.html that lives over in our public directory. And then we have our API route for getting the signature. But if a user tries to go anywhere else in the application, they're going to get a message just letting them know that that's not found, it doesn't exist. So this is oversimplified, of course. You're going to want to build a little bit more robust of an error handling system when you're in production. But again, for learning purposes, this will do the trick. Okay, so lastly, down here at the bottom, we're just setting a port and host variable. We're saying, hey, check and see if there's an environment variable for port and host. And if there aren't, then default to 3000 for the port and localhost for the host. And then go ahead and listen on that port and just log back that we are connected, we're listening, the server's up and running on that host and that port. That is it for our server side. Now, one thing I want to mention is, again, this is an oversimplification of all this. You will want to decouple some certain aspects. So in production, you'd want to take the configuration of Cloudinary, the things that we're doing up at the top here, and move these into their own module, which you can then import over into this file and use accordingly. Likewise, this route down here, you'd probably want to move into its own directory, like a routes folder. And within there, then you would have a file like an index.js or something with your routes. There may be other routes for your application, and this would be the one that generates the signature. Okay, now that we've looked at the back end, let's head over to our front end code and see how all that's working. All right, as mentioned earlier, we have a public directory here, and inside of it, we have an index.html. So this is just your standard HTML boilerplate. We do have a style sheet to make things look a little bit nicer, like the upload button, for example. We have an H1, it just says signed uploads to Cloudinary via the upload widget. And then a little paragraph here reminding you, hey, it's important that you configure your Cloudinary account details in the app.js file. So of course, you're not going to use that in your own implementation. It's just a reminder when you're developing. But most importantly, we have this button here with the ID of upload_widget. We have to have this button or some sort of element with that ID that the user can click on. We'll have an event listener over in our client-side JavaScript that is going to hook onto that. And when it's clicked, it's going to invoke the function that instantiates and pops up the upload widget. So we'll see that here in a moment. Lastly, we've got the upload preview div and the pre element with the ID of UW data. The div is where we're actually going to put the image, just a preview of it after it's been uploaded. That's where we saw that cat image a moment ago. And then the pre element is where we're going to print out the response that we get back from Cloudinary after we're done sending the request to upload our assets. All right, so another really important piece of the puzzle is this script right here. Inside of the HTML file or the template file in your backend project where you are including your upload widget, you absolutely have to have this line of code. So this script is going to be kind of like a content delivery network or CDN for the upload widget itself. Without it, we can't make use of the upload widget on the front end. So you've got to have that. It's going to link over to widget.cloudinary.com, and it's going to give you access to all of your Cloudinary upload widget code on your front end. Okay, so below that, we have our custom script. This is pointing to the public directory, which we already have our backend set up by default to load all static assets from public, so we don't actually have to explicitly say that here. Instead, we point to the folder within public where the script lives. In this case, the folder is called JS. So we have /JS/upload client widget.js. If we head over here to our JS folder and we look at the upload client widget.js file, we can see our front end code. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So first and foremost, we're using the document object to add an event listener to the page. This one's called DOM content loaded, and essentially the function that is the callback or the second argument to this method call will not get invoked until the DOM has completely loaded. So once the content on the page is completely loaded, then it's going to run this async function here. So everything inside of this is inside the async function, and that gives us the ability to do things like await a call to our backend using the fetch API. So the response variable is going to be assigned to the result of calling fetch, and fetch is going to send a request to /API/sign_upload_widget. That's our backend endpoint where we create the signature. So the response will be that JSON, and of course we need to run a .json on it to get it into a JavaScript usable form. That's what is going to happen here on this next line. Const data is equal to await response.json. Now the next thing we want to do is ingest the data from that response and use it to create options for our upload widget. So we have our cloud name, we're pulling that from data.cloudname, API key, pulling that from data.api key. So the next thing we have is that upload signature timestamp, and then the upload signature itself. Lastly, we have that matching folder. Again, this is optional, but if you want a folder to organize the assets that you're uploading from this upload widget in your Cloudinary dashboard, that's how you would create one. All right, next in line here, we have a function called process results. It takes two arguments, an error and a result. Now, if there is no error and there is a result, and the event property on the result, which is an object, is equal to the string value of success, then we go ahead and log the result to the developer console. Meanwhile, we stringify the result and we go ahead and print it to that UW data element on the page. That was that pre-element with the ID of UW data. Here we're changing the inner HTML to include the string, which is essentially the stringified version of the result object. Okay, now that we've printed the result object to the page, we actually want to show the user a preview of the image that they uploaded. So the next thing we're going to do here is create a variable called upload preview. We're going to assign that to the element with the ID of upload_preview. That's that div. Now we're going to reset the div's inner HTML, assuming this may not be the first time that we've uploaded something. So we'll set it to an empty string, which will clear it out. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll actually create an image element. We'll set its source attribute equal to the result.info.secure_URL, which will be the URL of the image that was just uploaded. The next thing we'll do is we'll set the alternate attribute to a string value, just describing what the image is. And then we'll set the width of that element to 300 pixels with image.style.width. Lastly, we will take the upload preview, which we had selected previously on line 20. That's that div. We will append the image as a child to that div with upload preview.appendChild, passing in the image that we just created right here on line 23. And what this whole process results thing does, of course, is it just prints out the result object while also appending the image to the page so that the user can preview it. Now, even though the process results function has been defined, it actually hasn't been called yet. So let's move on down here where we say const myWidget is equal to cloudinary.createUploadWidget. Now, Cloudinary is coming from that script that I mentioned to you earlier. The reason that we have access to Cloudinary or to the upload widget is because we included that CDN to the widget.cloudinary.com script, which now gives us this Cloudinary variable and gives us access to this method, createUploadWidget. So the createUploadWidget method takes two arguments. The first one is the options object, which we configured up above, and then a callback function, which in this case is the process results function that we just defined above. It'll send the request based on what's inside the options, and then once it gets the response, it'll use that process results function to handle the response. All right, here we are at the end, and the most important piece of the puzzle here is that we actually set all of this up to where when the user clicks on that upload files or upload image button, they're actually able to see the upload widget. So this line of code is what's going to do that. Document.getElementById, upload widget is going to select the button. Add event listener click is going to add a click event listener to it, which will then invoke this anonymous function here, which then invokes myWidget.open. So myWidget, of course, is the result of calling Cloudinary.createUploadWidget and passing it these arguments here. And so when we call myWidget.open, that is what makes the widget physically open on the page and allow the user to interact with it. At that point, the user can decide which one of the sources they want to use. They can upload files, they can enter in a URL, take a picture with their camera, or even connect to something like Google Drive or one of those popular stock photography websites. And then once they click submit, it'll upload the image to Cloudinary. Cloudinary will send back a response. The callback function will handle the response. And in this case, they'll be able to preview the image and see the response data on the page. All right, so assuming you've been following along and you have npm install run, you've got all your dependencies, you have your environment variables set up, then you should be able to open your terminal and simply run npm start. If everything's working correctly, you'll see a message like this where it tells you that your server is up on, in this case, localhost 3000. And then we can go ahead and command click on that, and it'll take you to the preview in the browser. At which point you can click on upload files, you can browse for a file, find the one you want, click open, and it'll immediately start uploading. And then when it's done uploading, you can click on done, and you can see the result here on the page. So that's it for using signed uploads with Cloudinary's upload widget in your Node.js, Express.js backend. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to join me on Discord. We'll have a link in the description. You can connect with me there. You can also post a comment here on the video itself, and I'll do my best to respond as quickly as possible. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.